We acknowledge the original owners of the land on which we podcast, whose stories were told for thousands of years. Today, we are recording in Meanjin. We pay our respects to elders past and present who may be listening. Sovereignty was never ceded. A quick note before we get started that there may be some swearing in today's podcast. If you don't like swearing or usually listen with children in the car, you have been warned. You're listening to What in the NDIS Now, a podcast where I, Hannah Redford, and my friend Sam Rosenbaum interview participants and providers about all things NDIS. This episode of What in the NDIS Now is brought to you by Astalty. Astalty is the software solution for NDIS professionals built by NDIS professionals. Astalty is my go-to software, and Astalty is trusted and loved by hundreds of other NDIS providers. I love how easy it is to use and how it keeps all my participant information, notes, and invoicing all in one place, available to me anytime from any device. Sign up now for your 14-day free trial. Head to astalty.com.au to sign up now. See for yourself how much easier managing all your NDIS business needs are by using Astalty. Thanks again to Astalty for sponsoring today's episode. Hi Sam, how are you going?
Yeah, hey Anna, going really well, thanks. Yourself?
Yep, I'm doing well. Last week everyone in my household was sick with some kind of awful virus. And so that wasn't fun.
Into Easter, we are coming up to that fabulous time.
Yes. Have you been doing anything interesting?
I have been camping and trying to do as little as I possibly can as late, with very varying ranges of lacking success.
I do have to real quick mention your shirt, because it's a black shirt with buttons down the front that have like neon dinosaurs.
Yep.
And the neon is like a blue and purple.
Yeah. It's fantastic, and it's a dark purple or navy shirt. I don't think it's, or it might be black. I don't know. I am colorblind. Anything looks like a color to me.
That's great.
But yes, no, I do love my dino shirt. But I do love my bright coloured shirts and ridiculous over the topness anyway. So,
and I did find a Fruit Loops shirt the other day, and I sent the picture to you.
May have gone and found it to acquire.
Yeah, it was just from JJ's.
Yeah.
I was kind of shocked to learn that JJ's had those ridiculous shirts.
JJ's and Lowe's. Like most of my ridiculous stuff, JJ's and Lowe's. Great shirts.
Amazing.
Really comfy too. More corporates need to embrace colour. But yes, who are we going today? What are we doing?
I guess we should get into it and stop talking about funny shirts.
We digress.
Because we do have a cool topic today. We're going to talk about plan management with the amazing Stuart Paull. Welcome to the podcast.
Greetings, pleasantries, salutations, Hannah and Sam. Thank you so much for having me on here, because I don't know about you, but plan management is the sexiest part of the NDIS, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. So I think that, you know what? This many episodes deep, it's about time that we addressed the plan management shaped elephant in the room.
While I agree with the latter part of that statement, that it has been a long time coming for a plan manager on the podcast, not through our own lack of trying, might we add. So thank you very much for coming on, though. The sexiest?
Absolutely.
That's a bit of a bold statement there, mate.
Look, I think that if you're not seeing the inner sexiness that comes from plan management, maybe take a step back and have a look at the plan managers themselves. They're gorgeous people. And there's nothing sexier than an Excel spreadsheet working perfectly and getting the correct answer the first time. I mean, that the level of satisfaction is up there with some of the best ASMR that you're ever going to find. Just that catharsis that comes with just, oh my God, the formula actually worked.
I'm right there with you on that line. I do
Chef's
love
kiss.
a good formula and an Excel spreadsheet that works.
No, I'm out.
Also, it's user-friendly. It's got to be user-friendly.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think so. I mean, Excel is like, and other software like that, not the ones including sponsors of today, that can have the tendency to be a little bit tricky and a little bit hinky. But when it does work well, it is absolutely amazing.
It can be. It just needs to have that bit of forethought in the front. Anyway,
so
I feel like we're on a topic that you and I could digress on and on for, but that's not necessarily the point of our podcast today. So yeah, we should get into the first question.
Yes, please, Hannah. I know you're having so much fun already.
Oh man, spreadsheets are like, I hate them. I hate Excel. It's not user friendly. It's freaking awful. But anyway, Stu, please tell us, where did you grow up?
So thanks for asking, Hannah. Really appreciate the question. So actually, I grew up in Western Sydney in a little place called Oxley Park. So for those of you playing at home, it is halfway between Penrith and Blacktown. Typically, young kids there will learn, the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, as well as the casual lock-picking class in between. It is the most delightful part of Sydney. But at the same time, I was very fortunate. So I, grew up in a very typical nuclear family. It is the quietest little part of what would otherwise be mistaken for Crackton in The Simpsons. And so it's completely understandable why people have a bit of a, oh, really? Western Sydney? Oh, my God. But no, actually, that's where I grew up. My family is sort of from different scattered sort of regions. My mum's family is actually from the Central West in a place called Cowra. And so that's where some of my roots are as well. But no, me personally, Western Sydney, I know that that's not, the most interesting place, but at least our public transport works, unlike certain areas of Queensland. And so I know that definitely helps. So yeah, I mean, that's where I grew up.
Well, I can't argue with that. After what I've been saying on the podcast.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've really got no comeback, so we've just got to accept our shame and then move on.
So that's it. You haven't moved an inch or a kilometre from where you grew up.
In terms of where I've lived, obviously I've moved a few times. I don't still live at home, thankfully. My mother, you know what? My mother would be shocked if I did. So I moved around different parts of Western Sydney. I'm very thankful that my work does allow me to get out and about quite a bit, and I do travel around. But no, in terms of where home is, I'm very fortunate to have just lived in the one place.
Oh, look, I love that. And as you know, like Jono from Astalty was a similar, and he was like, I'm even work in the same suburb that he grew up in. So there are people like that. It's okay.
I'm wondering that, or I'm wondering is the big jump and the never been in one place for more than a couple of years not norm?
No, I don't know that it is like us is the norm. People who, like me, I went to 2 different primary schools and 4 different high schools, and you went to way more than that.
Yeah, well, look, I know that I'm way out of the norm on most things in general, just to start with, but let alone the amount of school and different places I've been before I was 18.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess.
No.
But even so, I mean, even what's normal for one person is being normal for another. It doesn't matter. It's horses for courses.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you are defined by, your own personality, but your own experiences. And so those people that have hopped, awesome. That's you do you. And I know that there's people like me that have sort of never strayed too far, and that's cool too. I guess there's no... I guess if we're trying to find normal, you're never going to find normal. Mm-hmm. I guess all you're ever going to find is you.
Very true words and great words. But I can't say that you've been staying in one place, because before we started talking, you sort of went into a bit of your background, which leads us into our next question, which is how did you get into the disability sector?
Oh, goodness me. Okay, so yeah, my journey is very different to most of your previous guests as well as yourselves. So I actually am a primary school teacher by trade. I did a primary school teaching degree. I taught in primary schools for a number of years in Western Sydney.
Hang on. Before you go on, do you have a favourite year level or grade to teach?
It's a bit difficult because being a male in primary school, you're typically kind of pushed towards upper primary. I did typically enjoy years 4 or 5, mostly because by year 6, hormones have kicked in, and my God, the attitude of some of those kids. But year 4 and 5, they're still in that place where they're able to create such amazing things, but still retain that little bit of wonder and innocence that comes with it. So if I had to pick a grade, that would kind of be where I would want to sit, that year 4, year 5 kind of level. Yeah, so did that, finished that up, and actually had a lot of changes happening during that time. I then left the industry mostly because I love the act of teaching, the art of imparting knowledge, that pedagogy, but didn't enjoy the overbearing amount of data analysis administration that was then taking up more and more of my time. And so I walked away from teaching. I know that, education minister is probably not happy with that, but the idea is that I took that time for myself, and then my sister-in-law, the delightful sister-in-law of mine, who called me up and was like, "Hey, Stu, I know you're not doing anything right now because you've got a couple months off. Can you come and help me? I'm working in disability and job seeking employment, so people with Centrelink." And she's like, "Look, it'll just be for 3 months. It'll, you'll be fine. It'll be easy." I'm like, "Yep, cool." So 4 years later, I'm then running a disability employment site and a job active site, and sort of doing really well. So we're seeing some great turnaround there. In between that, I did do some other stuff. So I did actually do a little bit of time in the funeral industry. So, and yes, I know we're not going to just stop and pause on that for too long. So I did do work in the funeral industry. If you do want to talk about that, we can, because I know that's probably a little bit different.
What part of the funeral industry? Because you might know if you've been able to listen to particularly my episode, my mum is a Uniting Church minister, and her favourite thing to do is funerals.
Yes.
So I'm curious about which part of the funeral industry what you were doing.
Yeah, so I was actually working for a smaller funeral director or a funeral provider. Me and churches, look, I can go in there. I just feel a slight burning sensation on my head when I walk in. I do need to acknowledge that. But no, I did do a lot of different things. So I did have to do collections. So I would be the guy that's going out there to your home where, Nan's on the floor, and I have to encourage the family, guys, look, do me a favor. You don't want to see this. Just step outside for a minute. And of course, they all stand there gawking at you. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick up Nana now. We're going to take her out now. Just, okay. And so we'd do that. I would also help with, the helping getting them into their coffin, sort of doing a little bit. I didn't do too much of the mortuary. That was a little bit too morbid. Thankfully, I didn't have to do eye caps. That would be orkies. I would then go with the service. I would do the funeral service. I would be, all that sort of stuff that you would imagine. So those guys in suits that are walking around, that's usually me. That was what I did. I did that purely because when my own father passed away, I used that as part of my own sort of therapy and grief process to understand what he went through. And so I did that not because I actually wanted to, it wasn't for money or anything like that. It was purely because I wanted to learn. I wanted to go through that experience from the other side. And unfortunately, part of that is you see some things that you can never unsee, which can probably warp you, but I guess I'm very fortunate that I didn't get warped or weird at all. Very fortunate that didn't happen at all. And so,
You were weird before that?
I'm not weird. I'm delightful. So I did do that for a little while, but no, did disability employment for a while, and then during COVID, this is again, we eventually get to the disability sector. I went into workers' compensation, CTP accidents, and the NDIS. And so I was working for an allied health provider, and then eventually, through a whole bunch of stuff, eventually ended up in the NDIS with Plan Manage Assist. So that's the short version of my stuff. So that's a thing.
And you were a radio presenter at one point.
Yeah, so I did do a little bit of work with my brother in radio when I was younger, when I was actually a teenager. So it was actually before I was teaching. Did do that for a little while. We had some great fun. We got to play some music. We'd have people calling in and making requests. And, you know, I mean, the novelty of that interactivity that's live, you know, even now would be hilarious, but being a kid was just awesome. Getting to use the actual console. We actually were the ones doing both presenting and producing. There was only a small operation, but it was a lot of fun. And it was a great experience for me to practice my public speaking skills and to eventually be guests on random podcasts that people invite me on. Terrible decision, really. But that's where it got me.
Well, look, it's no less of a terrible decision than starting your own podcast, mate.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Sam. I mean, if someone's crazy enough to start a podcast deliberately trying to find the tiniest, shortest version of a podcast, say, for example, one called Plan Manage Assist Too Long Didn't Read, that would be a really crazy thing to do. And no one should look for that at all. Like, no one should. No.
Conveniently, because like Too Long Don't Read, if you search that on, I think you can't find it. We'll include the links in the show notes, everyone up above.
Just in case you were going to defy me and go and do that.
The audacity of our audience. So, like, they stumble across here, they stumble across yours. Who would have thought?
Exactly. I'm going to double up their podcasting experience by getting through 6 episodes at the time they get through just my rant in the last few minutes.
we absolutely love it. And it's very, we love a good, diverse story entranceway into the market. Into the disability sector as well, I guess. Gives you quite a unique perspective on life, I guess.
It does, and I think that the NDIS needs it. I think we can't just have everyone coming through one lens, because if we are all coming through one lens, we'll all only ever see things the one way. And we need a bit of diversification of not just personalities, but of thinking and of approaches, because we always should be trying to innovate. And again, this is my inner teacher coming out, because the moment you stop innovating, the moment you stop trying to learn, is the moment you should walk away. And I think that as a collective, we need more of that. So I encourage.
Soundbite
come out of a podcast. I think that's that.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with you. I love that you have done a whole bunch of really different things to lead you here. And I do love that idea of having loads of different experiences along the way, because even from the perspective of teachers, now this might not be your experience, but if you have a teacher who got into teaching later in life and had done things before that and can bring something a bit more interesting to teaching, that's always really handy. Whereas I've also had teachers, like when I lived in Bendigo, I had a teacher who went to the school I was at, went to La Trobe in Bendigo to do her teaching degree, and then was hired back by the same school. And I was like, right, so you have 0 world experience. What do you think you can teach me? And I was critical of that when I was in year 10.
Oh, wow. But you need that level of you've got to be able to have that ability to question. And that's just the critical thinking. Like, we need that, more of that, even if it's not necessarily positive or productive. We still need it, because that's, again, that you've got to challenge what exists in order to try and make things better. Because if you just assume that everything is fine, you never innovate, you never change, because you think that you're onto a good thing. And so Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the same goes with the disability sector, is that we should be looking for ways to challenge that thinking. And you're right, having that outside thinking and coming in is really a beneficial thing for the scheme overall. Even if not every idea is a gem, at the very least, we're giving it a go, we're seeing what works, and at least then we know what doesn't work. So, no, absolutely love the critical thinking aspect.
Yeah, so let's get into a bit about plan management, because we really want to talk about plan management. So can you first up tell us exactly what does a plan manager do?
So a plan manager, for what it's worth, I am not a plan manager myself, just for sake of clarity. But you're a good plan manager, and I want to emphasize a good plan manager because there are differences between good ones and not so great ones, should really be able to be aware of what's in a plan, see what's going on, evaluate how it goes against the guidelines, and then help make sure that not only is the line item correct, that the rates are correct, that there's sufficient funding in the plan, and then also make sure that that payment gets done. It really should not just be a rubber stamping process. You really need that extra level of safeguarding that should come from someone that knows what's what in the scheme. It's up to a good plan manager to be educated and aware of what's happening and what's changing in the NDIS so that they're apprised and they're able to then impart that education to the coordinators, to the providers, to ensure that that level of safeguarding is maintained. They shouldn't be necessarily gatekeepers, but what they definitely should be doing is making sure that everything going through is legit. And we want to make sure it's above board. And then, eventually paying some invoices.
Yeah, awesome. So this is where I think the name plan manager gets people so confused, because if you think about it, it sounds like a plan manager should manage the plan and what's happening with it. And then comes along a support coordinator and you go, but what's the difference between a plan manager and a support coordinator? And I have spent many hours explaining this to participants and providers and everyone else about how this works and thus who you should go to with what kind of problem.
Yeah, and I think that what it may be is simply that when the scheme is being put together and there's changes that happen as you go, there's going to be changes of title, changes of role, and we've got some of that language that may be antiquated or not necessarily related to what that person is actually doing. And not only that, we're then going to be adding navigator to that mix as well. You've got, all these different roles. I mean, one would then say, well, what's an LAC do? Like there's all of these different titles and whatnot. And we, as those who are in the industry, will have some level of understanding. As you just pointed out, Hannah, not everyone does, which can be to its detriment. But I think that what we've got is, because we've got this constant changes, constant on the fly sort of things happening, it can lead to a lot of confusion. And I think the only way that that's ever going to be resolved is, you can change all of the titles and start again, but then the very next, 3 months from that point is going to be, but wait, so that's a plan manager is now a plan accountant? Is that kind of what we're calling them now? Like, it's the same problem over and over again that just comes from having these ongoing changes throughout the scheme and what we're getting from it. You're right, though. It does cause so much confusion for participants, for providers, for support coordinators, like some of them who are, the sole traders who are starting out, or the ones that are just sort of really trying to make a difference, constantly feeling like they've got to be aware of just what people do, let alone how they function and where they fit in.
Absolutely. And all plan managers do this role of paying the invoices slightly differently. One of them is some plan managers have these fancy apps that you can have on your phone, and at any moment you can check what's happening. And that's great if you're really tech savvy. And then if you're not, there's some plan managers that are more, they'll contact you once a month and send you out the statement, the monthly statement. And then you have others that have call centers nowadays. and you don't know who you're necessarily going to get. And that could be great for some people who want to be a little bit anonymous in some ways. And then you've got others who are smaller, and so they can know you when they pick up the phone. They know who it is they're talking to. How do you perceive plan management in that sense? Like, what is your preferences?
So I do see that stark contrast where you'll have the accountant who's doing bookkeeping but does plan management on the side. They may be supporting just a handful of participants. And you've then got the large insurance company that wants to buy their way to the top, no names. And so when you've got such a wide range of size, there's going to be a bunch of different ways in which we go about the job. So in a sense, there is no two plan managers are going to be exactly the same. Yes, they have a similar function, much like you can have different versions of Excel or different spreadsheet makers, but they still make spreadsheets. And so the idea being is that what you're then looking for is how you want to be supported, how you want to be connected to that particular organization. And so when you've got those big national ones that are the call centers, and the call centers may not even be in Australia, I think that's another thing that we need to highlight, is that that can be a massive issue for people who want to be able to communicate and connect, that can be to that organization, to that participant's detriment. I am very fortunate that where I'm at kind of aligns really nicely, that there, and without sounding too pluggy, there is no call center with our guys. We actually don't even have a receptionist. So when you call, it's going to be one of the senior plan managers that answers the phone. And if you then vibe with one in particular, you're just like, oh, hey, I want to speak to Mon, or I want to speak to Irene. And you can do that. But if you want to remain sort of anonymous, or you want to have that sort of, I'm not sure, you don't have to ask for anyone in particular. You can just get whoever answers the phone and just go, hey, I've just got a question. I think that it's one of those things where you want to have those great systems and resources. You want to have the app so that those that are tech savvy can be in control of their destiny. And they do want to have the best of both worlds when it comes to plan versus self-management. And then you want to have that connection and personal touch that people do want to have, because you want to have your experience with a plan manager mirror what you get from your support coordinator, because you want it to feel like it is one cohesive team. And if you've got a support coordinator who's a smaller organization or just a one-off person, and then with a national call center, it's chalk and cheese in terms of your experience. But if the person that's the plan manager is mirroring what the support coordinator is doing, it makes it feel a lot more like a cohesive, collaborative team. Much as I'm going to swear and say collaborate, that's how it is that we then have a genuine team supporting a participant. So I think that's kind of where my own values sit. And I'm very fortunate that where I am mirrors that. So it actually makes my life a lot easier. Yeah,
that's a really really kind of good, lot of good points there. And I have a similar approach in that kind of conversation with my consulting and business clients when they go, what system should I use to manage my clients and billables? There's no right system that's going to fix all those needs. You need to identify what your key needs are, and then what you would like out of it, and then go through that process, because as we've all sort of just had in this conversation, everyone's got different actual needs and desires and what they want and what they call as a performance. So you've kind of got to individually look within and go, what do I want?
Exactly. And I think that really comes down to what the participant needs in terms of how independent they want to feel or how supported they want to feel, that will then alter what they perceive to be important to them. And that's exactly what it should be. We need to have that diversification of the type of sector that we have, because if you don't like conglomerates, if you don't like big ones, hey, makes me look better by comparison. So I've got no complaints there.
One of my bugbears that I've seen occasionally recently, and a few over the years, some plan managers requiring providers to upload their invoice into the plan manager's system. And this frustrates me, because if, say, I'm using Astalty, for example, and I click, send out all the invoices, but I've got this one that needs to be specially uploaded, it's the most annoying thing to have for a provider, because you can't just click that button of like, yep, all the invoices are good, ready to go, send them out into the universe. It drives me crazy, and I wish I could stop them and go, no, this sucks.
I mean, yeah, it does. And it's one of those things where you've got those providers that, like those plan managers that do require the manual upload, and it's sort of doing it yourself, and it's really tedious. When they're API connected and they do have the ability to just go, yeah, we can just get that done. There should always be the accessibility, not just for participants, but for providers, for coordinators, to be able to access the plan manager in some way. So yeah, I mean, I don't understand why it could not be the way that, again, we've got it where you can just email through an invoice if you need to. If you just want to send it as an email, that's where Astalty sort of really thrives, is that then just goes immediately to our team, goes straight to the senior, and senior goes, yep, done, and it just pops it in. It's way more complicated than it needs to be if you're just getting in your own way.
Exactly, because then
100%.
I'm advising participants, oh, look, this is the most annoying system to use. Do you maybe want to change providers? Because I don't like this plan manager.
Yeah, and I know that it's hard because you do want to offer choice and control. And if a participant does have a certain vibe with a certain plan manager, I mean, you don't want to stop them.
No.
But at the same time, I guess what you do want to do is highlight what does work best for, you or for other people, and go, hey, look, this is the type of system that I would suggest you consider, but you do you. Ultimately, we don't control anyone, and anyone who thinks they do is lying.
Oh, no. I used to always talk to people about, what do you want from a plan manager? And here's all the ways they're generally a bit different. And then once they tell me sort of what they think they need from me, saying, well, do you want a call center? Do you want someone independent? Do you want, to be able to email them? Or do you want to be able to just pick up the phone? What do you want to do? Do you want a fancy app? And then I go, okay, here are the 3 that fulfill what you're wanting and are also not crap.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing, isn't it? The does not suck list as well, which just sort of really, yeah. But no, and yeah, it's one of those things where you want to be able to give. It's not that we want to control or coerce. What we want to do as good providers is to empower people with educated options to say, hey, these are people that I've met, these are people that I know, or these are people that I've worked with that I can vet to say they have done a good job for me in the past. That's not you saying you need to use this one. This is saying these are people I've got positive feedback for, because when you're looking to decide something, especially something you're not educated on or not familiar with, the first thing you're typically going to rely on are the reviews of others, particularly those you trust. Same when you want to go and buy a car. You go and buy a car, the first thing you're going to do is talk to that friend who knows about cars. That friend's not going to turn around and go, hey, you need to buy the Elantra from that dealership on Main Street. Ask for Steve, tell him Robbie sent you, and this is what you're going to get. No, they're going to be like, oh, hey, maybe have a look at the Kia, the Hyundai, and maybe the Honda. And that's empowering you with educated experience or educated choices to then go and look for yourself. And I think that that's kind of what we want to be doing and should be doing more of.
How much of, I don't know if you will know this, but how much of an impact did pace have on the work that your plan managers do?
I can say that there's mixed feelings. So I know that there is some difficulty in having 2 systems at the same time, and there will always be that ongoing issue for as long as an antiquated system exists, particularly when you've got rollovers and no decisions being made and things like that. So the frustrations and difficulties come more so from almost having 2 simultaneous systems. The other issue we have at the moment is, and I'm sure there are going to be several plan managers who say, oh my God, yes, when I say this, is endorsement. It is a massive ongoing issue for plan management in general, where we'll get a form filled in, a service agreement done, and it's like, yep, cool, no dramas, happy to help, no worries. But without the endorsement, you're asking us to do everything with handcuffs on, and it stops us from doing anything. And when that doesn't happen, we then have providers calling us, we have participants call, like we get all sorts of things happen. And it's like, please do the endorsement call at the same time as you do your form. It will make life so much easier for everyone. And endorsement, like the idea of endorsement, and I'm sure that we'll touch on my ideal NDIS later, is that really it could be done with a two-factor authentication on a phone. I think that that's another thing that we lack, is the accessibility for those who are hearing impaired that can actually do an endorsement call, because right now they can't call. So why not have something where it's just you open an app, much like they do with Centrelink. They have the ability to do things through two-factor authentication on Centrelink. Why do we not have it for that? But we'll get to that. That's a problem for later. That's for future Stuart's problem.
I completely agree. The endorsement idea. So what this is, for people who might not fully understand, is when people are agency managed or their plan manager has to be agency managed and your plan is in PACE, you actually have to call the NDIS call centre and say, hey, I really want to use Plan Manage Assist. I need to endorse them so that I can actually work with them. The idea around this was so that people who get your information couldn't just randomly, under the old system, could randomly put in a service booking and start taking money off your plan without you necessarily knowing. So this is what we're trying to avoid with this endorsement stuff. However, it does put in a barrier and puts in an extra step that wasn't there before, that everyone is trying to get their head around. And like you said, there's no accessible way to do it if you're hearing impaired, which is ridiculous because it's a disability agency for people with disabilities.
Yep.
What?
But apparently people with hearing impairment don't exist in this industry. Apparently that doesn't happen.
But also talk about missing the non-verbal peoples as well.
Well, that's exactly right, because how is someone who's non-verbal going to be able to communicate those wants or needs to someone over the phone? But hey, not in charge of the NDIS yet.
Well, we're still getting questions about when people are going to grow limbs back. So,
oh yeah, they totally will. Oh,
yeah,
totally will. Look, just walk it off. Walk it off. I mean, you know, that leg's totally going to grow back. Just walk it off. You'll be fine.
Mm.
Yeah, that actually reminds me, the other day I saw on Facebook that a participant who was a double amputee of their legs, the planner proudly called their support coordinator and said, "Oh, I got this person podiatry funding."
Oh, fantastic. What a great use of funding. Oh my goodness, that. You know what? That brings a song to my heart, Hannah, to know that person who has a double leg amputee participant going on there, that they're going to get the podiatry that they so sorely need. Fantastic. There's definitely no wastage in the NDIS.
No.
None.
Like, I understand that planners are not reading reports, but you should at least know by just glancing at their profile that podiatry is not required.
Common sense has no place here, Hannah. Come on. Really. And the issue that we have is, we've got planners who are not necessarily even glancing to know what may be happening. We have thousands upon thousands of dollars being spent on reports that aren't necessarily being read to the level that they need to be read, and therefore impacting on those participants and their families not getting the level of support that they need because of something that's really should be happening. So, yeah, it's crazy, but like I said, there's absolutely no wastage in the NDIS. It is a flawless system that everyone should be absolutely praising and hailing as the savior that it is.
I'm loving that the sarcasm's not coming from me for this episode.
What are you talking about? I've been genuine this entire time. I haven't lied once. There's no lie. The sarcasm is just purely I guess it's inferred, not implied. So I guess if you're taking sarcasm from my tone, then that's just on you, Sam.
Well, I do like a good bit of sarcasm.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it does. We do need it as a psychological defense mechanism. Otherwise, we would all be going crazy.
Yeah, so the next thing I want to ask you about is there have been a lot of changes to the rules with STA or / respite.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people now are having to call their plan manager and go, okay, this is an idea I have of how I want to do my STA. And then the plan manager has to go, no, none of that works with the rules.
Yep.
And so what I'm wondering is, have you heard from the plan managers how they are sort of dealing with the STA changes?
Look, given that there's still going to be more changes to come for sure, it is always a constant state of flux, and we kind of have to go, well, this is where we are at the moment. This is what the situation is with your plan in your circumstances as it sits. I think that first and foremost, it's about explaining how and what STA and respite, I know that we're putting those two together, are really intended for, and that it is not intended to be a holiday. And I think that that's kind of been where it's been abused in the past, and that might be where participants may be like, well, but Frank got to do that. Oh, but I got to do that a couple of years ago. Well, yes, you did, or yes, they did, but that really wasn't what it was meant to be doing. And so now that we've sort of got this lens or this focus on what STA is about or what respite is about, that we're then seeing a bit of that pushback. And so my team have been really positive in saying, look, understand where you're coming from, but your plan doesn't allow this, and then sort of potentially exploring options with the coordinator as to what does respite look like, or what is the function of respite, and how can we better use it? And I'll give you a bit of a diversion without naming any names for sake of privacy. But I do know of a coordinator who was requested for respite from a participant and their family. Look, things are really hard right now. We really just need a bit of respite. We could really use a bit of a break so that we can sort of recharge as those informal supports at home. And so the coordinator was like, look, if we go with respite in the traditional sense, you will burn through your funding so quickly it's not funny. How about we look at what the respite is meant to do? It is about giving the family that sort of a bit of a distance or a bit of a break so that that participant can be supported with all of the things that they need in a way that allows the family to have a bit of space. So then instead of going with traditional respite, what if we increase the level of support in the home temporarily? Or what if we looked at doing more of those out and about day programs if the challenging behaviours are happening during the day? Or, those different ideas on ways to more creatively use the funding that is already there without just immediately going to the big ticket item of respite or STA, and trying to be a bit more creative with that. And I think that that was really positive, because it was like, okay, taking it back to what is the purpose of this, or like what is the purpose of this item, which is the respite is to support those people around them and just to support the participant in that way. And I think that by doing that sort of stuff and going, well, look, how about we look more creatively at it? We're trying to take the emphasis off, it's not a holiday. It's not, it's not the Gold Coast trip that you're thinking it is. I'm sure that we'd all love to have a trip on Cavalav that's funded by the government, but it's not meant to be that. It's really meant to be that respite for those people around you, and that short-term accommodation and how it's used. It does make it a little easier when we reframe it as to this is actually what it's supposed to be from the beginning. Because it's always hard. People get used to things. People get used to the idea and acclimated to being given a certain thing over and over and over again. And to have that taken away suddenly, despite the fact that you shouldn't really have had it like that, does make it hard for them to understand. So I hope that answers your question in a bit of a roundabout way. But it's been challenging, but still a really good way to reframe the conversation.
I really like the way that you have explained that about reframing the conversation, and also your idea of getting a little bit creative with it. I think that's really important for people to understand and to more than that to think about. How else could the end goal be done? And that's something that can be really challenging. But I think if you have a good team behind you, or you might call your plan manager and say, I don't have an idea. I have no ideas. Please give me some ideas because I'm so burnt out, my brain can't think straight. That's what your plan manager, well, it's not there for, but that's what they're there for.
I guess it's an unofficial part of what a lot of plan managers can or have taken on. I have always encouraged coordinators that if they ever get stuck, that they can touch base with me, because if I'm not necessarily a plan manager, I can act as that sort of pivot point and make things a little easier to potentially connect them with who they want to speak to, or to get that answer to that question, or to get that idea in a way that puts less pressure on the plan managers to come up with an answer there and then. Or I may even be able to give them some ideas based on the experiences that I've had as well. So I think that that's a luxury that not every plan manager will have. And you're also assuming that the plan manager is as knowledgeable as they need to be, or as experienced as they need to be. And again, you're going to have varying degrees, particularly if you end up calling a call center. So that's something to really keep in mind, that yes, you do want to have a great rapport and a great relationship with your plan manager, but that doesn't come from just calling a random call center or calling a one-off that may not necessarily know. So that does take time and trust.
You sort of made a big point around participants having to get used to the new STA rules and get a little bit more innovative, but they're not the only sort of people that are being impacted by this as well. Providers do STAs, always looking at that. There have been some big national programs that I'm not talking about the cruises and the let's go on the holidays. What I'm talking about is the program specifically aimed at the kids' development, autistic programs, camps, those sort of ones where the participants themselves would not be able to cope in a bricks and mortar house for what the government would like to now be a group home short-term accommodation facility, is if you're reading between their lines.
Yeah.
I've seen some guys that are being very defiant and trying to remodel and move forward and become really innovative. Some really big national programs, not that I've ever figured out how they've charged what they charge for their programs, but they've closed down their shop entirely now as well because of this decision. What have you sort of seen, and what sort of do you know within the parameters of that? So it sort of still works for those parents that are going, I need this holiday program because I can't survive with my kids at home for that period of time.
Yeah, it is a bit of a tricky one, Sam, and you're absolutely right that there is always going to be an exception to every rule, or a different way of looking at situation. When it comes to those particular scenarios, I would say, look, maybe we need to be looking at what is capacity building and what does that look like, because that is what some of those programs really should be about. Is yes, they are technically a respite for the parents, and that is about that. But at the same time, they're not just going to take a camp. They're actually doing something productive. They're actually building their capacity. So maybe we need to look at how the rules around capacity building focus it. Because again, the other issue as well is that, as you said before, is the rate at which some of these are charged is really quite high. Potentially looking at maybe where does it fit in terms of capacity building, in terms of using those skills or building on those skills, or that social development, because we also have the same thing with things like gaming therapy, which obviously we don't have gaming therapy, but we do have participants that can potentially look at using, capacity building or social development sort of ideas of programs from gaming as the medium rather than as a therapy. Same goes with the potential for art and music therapy, because we don't know what's exactly going to happen after April 17. Again, not knowing what date this drops, but we may have an answer by the time this comes out. But these are things to consider, is the question really about how do we make a program that is, as you're describing, Sam, both a respite and a capacity building program, like a camp or like those services to help kids. Maybe we need to be looking at, are they just purely respite under respite and putting it in that code, or is it a capacity building program? And maybe we need to look at how the rules go with capacity building. It's not that we want to devalue what those programs can do for kids and also by extension for their parents or caregivers. But what we do want to do is make sure that we're not seeing blowouts of spending and blowouts of funding, because kids' plans are typically also not the biggest either. The last thing we want to do is be blowing a large chunk of that plan on a 1-week camp when it's a 12-month plan. And then by month 8 or 9, it's, we can't see the therapist every week. Or we don't want to be seeing that kind of thing happen because of a bit of respite for the family. That being said, I know that there are other things that potentially could be looking out for Carer Gateway for things like siblings and parents like that. But you're right. I think that it's not that we want to take it away. It's just that we want to reframe the conversation about what is the purpose of that particular support.
Yeah, 100%. But the biggest problem that we have, especially when you look at providers trying to innovate within the market space, and especially when we're talking about this sector and STAs, the clamp down and pushing on because originally it was the Wild West, because it was kind of a broad statement that everything kind of may have been included within STA.
Yeah.
And now we're getting to the sort of point where we're pulling back on it and everything is being scrutinized on it. The question that I'm sort of seeing on some of this, though, is like, what's the line between what are we calling what's being claimed and what are we calling what's a business expense towards profit margin? Because if we're sort of calling that a profit versus claiming, it becomes a very different question. And then how much overreach is this in the government pushing into NDIS providers' profit margins?
Yeah, you're right. And there is a difference, and I think that our listeners are going to be very easily understanding that there is a real distinction between being profitable and profiteering. And I know that, we're all still technically, as much as we might be individuals who genuinely care and want to make a difference, we are still running businesses and we do still need those businesses to keep the lights on. I can totally respect that. It is not a question of saying you shouldn't make money. It really is a bigger question of what is a reasonable profit margin for this particular activity? How is it going to be best utilized? And we don't want to see it's a bit of an overspend. It's an overreach of going from as you said, Sam, the Wild West where everything was cool to now going back to bank is basically nothing is cool. And we do want to try and find that happy medium where you do want to have, if it's a reasonable and necessary support, you want to make sure that the family can look and potentially access it. But because we've had such a huge disproportionate amount going in one direction to then overcompensate and go for another for various political reasons, we then see that shift. And you're right, there are going to be some good providers that we lose in the process, and I can only hope that whenever the system does get fixed by some tyrannical dictators, not me at all, that we might see that happy medium come back and have, those types of supports being re-examined as to what they could look like or how they could be done in a way that is both reasonable and necessary for both the participant and the scheme itself.
Yeah, 100%. Because if like the government on both sides goes on about sustainability and viability to make sure that we've got the system in the first place, but if the system's destroying the people that are running in the ground running it, then it's going to have bigger problems in the long run.
Yeah, and look, I know that there's always going to be, but there'll always be another provider, or the providers will come back, or they'll do something. You're absolutely right, Sam, is that there is that the perception for, and politicians obviously have a very different agenda. They're not just in it for the NDIS itself. They will be for what's in it for the general constituency. And the public perception has been unfortunately quite heavily altered by, from the politicians that we have. And it's not from either side in, sort of any one particular side. It does happen from both, where they do want to maintain a positive public image that, we're being responsible with our spending, but we're going to do it by taking it from the people who need it most. And we're going to blame it on people committing fraud. That's to say that we're not saying that fraud doesn't happen. It does. We all know it does. But to use that as a scapegoat to cut funding to participants who need it a lot more than, some others, it's not their fault and they're the ones that are made to suffer. But Unfortunately, that's not anything that we can necessarily control.
No. But it would be
So-
good if the states came to the table and started getting this foundational supports in, which are meant to support this pulling of everything out. It hasn't happened before they started pulling it out. Not surprised.
And you're absolutely right. And again, that comes back to the gap between the medical system and the NDIS as well, where we're seeing a lot of blame shifting that can potentially happen from one to the other. And in the middle are these poor families that are just trying to support their loved one and kind of going, well, I guess we're dipping in our own pocket for this one. Superannuation, what's that? Unfortunately, we see unfortunate situations where that does happen. And I personally would rather see a way where we bridge that gap a little better for people to get onto the NDIS, but also to get those services and supports that they need in the earliest stages. Because every dollar you spend early, and this is even take away the morals, take away the ethics, take away all the positivity, focus solely on the dollars. Every dollar you spend earlier is going to save you $20 later. But because the $20 later comes well after one political cycle, there's not going to be a real urgency to change that. So unfortunately, this is where people like us who are going to be here beyond a cycle or two, beyond that period of time, are like, we're going crazy going, hey, let's do something about it now. But what can you do?
Well,
And,
maybe have a Royal Commission and an NDIS review where we spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on making recommendations that we haven't really done much about.
But we got the recommendations.
That's my point.
They look pretty. They look
They
pretty.
were so pretty. I've got them on my shelf.
Oh, absolutely. And I apologize in advance, Hannah, for to making Ellie's life miserable with the amount of chopping and editing that's going to happen with this later on. So my apologies there.
She's fine. She loves it.
Look, for those listening at home, this has been one of the most interesting podcast recordings due to technical glitches that may have resulted in my leg cramping and falling off my chair due to laughing.
Yeah, at some point, I'm sure there'll be some sort of blooper episode. Knowing my luck, I'm going to feature heavily with that technical issue that we had.
The advantage on all of this, Stu, is that we don't do the video recording.
For me, I didn't fall down and have my leg cramp, but just saying. And I haven't been laughing in between every second sentence this entire recording.
Just at the point where someone was sounding like a chipmunk.
I no idea I didn't hear any of that. I didn't hear any of it, so I don't know what you mean.
Understandable. Understandable. It seems like you've been getting some training from some very interesting press conferences lately.
Look, you could argue that. One could also argue that I just have strong opinions of my own, and I try not to let it, and this is going to be probably cut. I'm not too worried about sort of letting that stuff come through in what I believe, because I know that there are others that share my opinion. And whilst I don't ever say things that are deliberately offensive, I know that not everyone will agree with me, and that's okay. I'm okay with people not agreeing with me, as long as you don't, go to just belittling people. Actually back up what you're saying, and I'll be like, cool, happy to hear it. That doesn't always happen, but what can you do?
The art of constructive debate seems to have disappeared a decade or two ago.
It certainly has, when you start seeing very big gaps between what opinions there is. So it's very black and white, very divisive, that there is no middle ground. As soon as you take away that middle ground, as soon as you have that option removed, that you're either with us or against us. Only a Sith deals in absolutes. And unfortunately, when that happens, that's where we lose the ability to have constructive debate, because there is no ability to see that middle ground.
I love the use of that reference there. Fantastic.
We have loved having you, Stu, but it's time to start wrapping up. Yes. So I'm going to ask you our final question. In your ideal world, what would the future of the NDIS look like? Okay,
I have thoughts. So, in case you didn't hear the paper scrunching,
oh my goodness, he has a piece of paper ready.
I actually did stop and think about this, and whilst I don't have all of the kinks ironed out, I I do believe we need to take away some of the shift that we've seen on billing and that sort of stuff. I want to see it to be back more towards outcomes and where those goals actually then drive the funding. So I know that we claim that it does, but it doesn't to an extent that I think it should. And I think that if we put more emphasis on those outcomes, it will then impact the outcomes that we get for participants in terms of making those goals reality. And those goals should not be unattainable. They should be even just smaller goals or incremental goals, really driving that. Because again, inner teacher coming out, I absolutely believe we need to see a better separation of those key services between plan management, support coordination, allied health, SIL, SDA, where they need to be separated. I know that won't necessarily happen, because as soon as that comes into legislation, there's the next day that all of a sudden that multi-service company all of a sudden gives birth to several other smaller companies. And I believe that needs to be stamped out. I do believe that you need to be good at something and just stick with it, because it then allows for avoiding the conflict of interest problem that we have, and it is rampant.
Testify.
Testify. I also, and this is going to be where this might be controversial opinion here. I am of the belief that support coordination should not be done as a billable hours service, but should be a set amount of funding per month, like plan management. However, should have additional levels added. So it should be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. And that will then allow support coordinators to, instead of focus on how many hours did they bill, what action did they take to improve the quality of that participant's life in a way that's more easily transparent, because that then allows support coordinators to have more focus on what they actually want to be doing, which is supporting people and coordinating services, instead of how can I bill for that text message. So that might not be popular especially with business owners. I don't care if you don't like me for that one, but I think that needs to change. I do believe that we need.
Well, the fact of the matter is, there's been decades of suitable business modeling that was used previously that would back your statement up.
Yeah, it's not like logic has sort of any direction on that, Sam. And so I do also believe that we need
place in the NDIS. Like logic has no place in the NDIS.
Unfortunately, no. I think that we need to look at support coordinators having a set maximum on their caseload. I think that we have too many organisers that have ridiculously high expectations of their coordinators, and as soon as you go past, say, 35, depending on their level, of course, there's a little degree of flexibility, but as soon as you go past 35, where you can no longer theoretically dedicate an hour per week to a participant, immediately you are no longer able to do your job effectively, because crises will happen. One participant might need more of your time one week and others will need less. But as soon as you exceed that limit, that 35 and up, you then start to see a drop in the quality of the service that's being operated on. And so I would like to see that becoming something, whether you do it on a point system based on their level, I don't know. I don't run the NDIS yet, but that's what I would be doing. I do agree that there needs to be registration across the board in terms of the accountability, in terms of that. However, I do think there needs to be some scale in the size or the cost and how that's done, or the speed at which registration is done, the level of work that goes into the registration process. But the core idea of registration, I think, is there and should be implemented. But I do also believe we need to have a provisional registration system like you do with your car, where when you're first starting out and you haven't had a chance to do much yet, it's like a provisionally registered, much like an unregistered now, where it's self-managed or plan managed only, and that by that 12-month mark, you're either registered or you're not, and potentially look at something along those lines. Look, I don't know about the navigator model. I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know what it should look like. I'm still stewing on that even this morning.
I think it sucks.
I do, and I agree with you.
The way that it has been proposed at the moment, it's terrible, because what I don't want to see, and what I think has never worked in any part of disability, is having things siloed. And I just don't understand the idea of having... I understand to a point that having a navigator who really understands, say, home and living and are specialised in that, but your whole plan is not going to be just home and living. And if you have home and living and you want to get a job and you want to learn some new skill, like, are you going to have 5 different navigators? Like, the proposal as it is maddening to me with that idea. Never in the history of services has it ever worked to have things siloed. And I think it is the wrong direction to start siloing off or having really separate people or divisions for different things. But that's my 2 cents.
And you're right. I think the other part that's also maddening for coordinators particularly is just that we just don't know exactly what's going to happen, because everyone loves uncertainty. Everyone loves knowing that you don't have security in a forced registration model, because everyone wants to go out and spend 5 figures or 4 figures worth of money to get a registration that may or may not be completely worthless in 12 months' time. People do that. They want to do that. So guys, by all means, continue to be unsure. But you're absolutely right, Hannah. I think that's maddening. I do still have a few more, and I'll go through this, and I know that this will probably get trimmed, so that's okay. I believe that we should have potentially even look at how many providers are being bought out. I have concern that we will get to a point where it would potentially even go under the consumer watchdog for being anti-competition if we get to that continued ongoing concern. It's not there yet, but I think it's something to be monitoring or be mindful of. I don't think that anyone's looking at it at the moment. So, but I don't know, maybe they are. I think as well, replacement supports, which we didn't get to talk about today, maybe that's for episode later on, in a certain number episode later. Replacement supports, I think that we should, instead of looking at replacement supports, look at exemption. The reason being is that replacement supports, an iPad is not a replacement for a speechy. It doesn't quite work. But having iPads on the no list and saying, well, look, I'm applying for an exemption because I have a non-verbal participant and this is their only means of communicating for the other 100 and so many hours in a week that they're not seeing a speech therapist, then, and a speech therapist does more than just speech. They also look at other conditions and other concerns. So I think that there needs to be less focus on replacement and more focus on exemption instead. There's always going to be grey. I can't fix that, but that's just my own opinion. And I do also think we need to speed up the rate at which abuse and allegations of abuse are examined and investigated and acted upon. I think that unfortunately we are seeing it's not because of a lack of care. I think unfortunately it's just the way the system's designed that they could probably improve on, where we really want to see faster action on these unfortunate circumstances. We don't want participants dying because we just didn't investigate something fast enough. So that's my notes. I had a few, and I know that took up a lot longer than your usual answer, but that's me.
I definitely love that last point, and quite a number of those points above.
And this is exactly why we asked this question, because everyone has a different way of approaching it. And I love every single one of your points and all of the ideas that you feel are really letting down the system and really need to be examined. And I completely agree with those, particularly those ones, but particularly with independence. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I call it singing, but I rarely sing. I sing about this all the time, about providers doing one thing and doing it really well, and stop trying to do everything under the NDIS sun. Also help me. But particularly where plan managers and support coordinators should never, ever, ever be in the same company. And it drives me completely batty when they are, because I just think there's no way you can get around that conflict of interest.
Well, I mean, we know that it happens. I mean, I've even spoken to support coordinators who will remain nameless, who have had pressure from on high within their own organization telling them, why are they not joining us for plan management? And mostly because those coordinators believe in avoiding conflict of interest and they're trying to do the right thing. Mostly because I do like to know what's happening across the scheme, and that's where these conversations happen. But yeah, there needs to be that degree of separation. But I think from those key ones, plan management, support coordination, allied health, SIL SDA, having those particular ones separated, there are going to be those services that complement one another. Like there's going to be ones where like a day program, community access, or, community access and transport. There's going to be some where there's blending of a couple of different services together that there would be a genuine possibility for use for, but they don't necessarily feed into one another. And I think that that's kind of where the issue is. It's not that you shouldn't have the ability to choose who's supporting you or doing it in that way. It's when you start seeing organizations that then funnel a participant from one end to the other and just wringing out the plan throughout. And are you the best provider for absolutely every service? Like really, really ask that. Are you the absolute best provider of every single service? Because if that was the case, no other provider should exist. It should just be you. But, I think we've got more providers than one for a good reason.
Yeah, exactly. I know Esther also says that behaviour support should be independent and stand on its own. And I really agree with that, because it can otherwise be a little bit contentious, because what I've seen sometimes is a SIL provider who brings in their behaviour support practitioner and basically tells them what to do. And whereas if you have someone who is totally independent of any of it, can come in with fresh eyes and say, I'll take that under advisement, but also may say, no, that's unnecessary.
Yeah, and that's again filtering down to what is in the best interests of the participant, and having those separations of those organizations and ensures that conflict of interest is managed well, is that the focus is then on what's in the best needs of the participant in every single circumstance. But that's why I'm, very fortunate that the company I work for, Plan Manage Assist, only does one thing. They don't do anything else. They just do the plan management. They're not trying to do plan management and support coordination, or they're not trying to do, support coordination and this, and this, and this, and this. Oh, and by the way, we also do plan management. So, yeah, it's exactly where it's exactly where I live. It's all in there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We have thoroughly enjoyed our time with you this morning.
It was my absolute pleasure, and I would love to come back again if you ever want to have me back.
Absolutely.
In a hoot.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Until next time. Bye.
Goodbye.
See ya later.
Thank you for listening. Please share with people you know. Until next time, as the Green Brothers say, don't forget to be awesome. Oh, you sound like a chipmunk. Something's gone wrong. No, it's not working. Sam has lost it. Oh my God.
I laughed so hard my leg just cramped up and I fell off my chair.